So even though I know I have the option to choose a preset from one of these instruments, I'm going to start with something more basic. So going back to the pop-up browser, starting from scratch, all instruments, I want to choose one of the native Bitwig synths. There's a handful to choose from, and I'm going to choose one called Polymer. All right. Now, again, I'm selecting this from the devices. I haven't chosen a preset type, so this will just be the default setting. If I wanted to choose a preset for Polymer and didn't care about the category, I could simply click this arrow, and now I'm looking at all the presets that are just for this instrument. But again, I don't want to choose a preset. All right, let me hit OK to confirm that I want this, and here we go. All right, so some basics to go over. When you have a device loaded, and we see it here in the device panel, if I click on the name of the device, if the inspector panel is visible, I can see certain information about that device. For synthesizers, what's really important is how many voices you can generate at once. In this case, we can see over here it says voices and 6. So this means I could play a chord with up to 6 notes if I wanted to. Six notes. Okay, my hand couldn't really reach a good note there. But at that point, a voice is going to be stolen, and one of those sustaining notes will no longer sustain. It'll have to get taken for the new one. All right. If I want to play more than 6 notes at a time, I can always increase the voices. Or if I want this to be a monophonic patch, which I think is what I want, I could change the voices to be mono. Nice. There's other parameters here, but we'll talk about those a little bit later. All right. But one thing that's in the inspector panel that's really good to go over now is the fact that there's a show help button. For every single device that comes with Bitwig, you can click show help, and you will get some extremely well-documented information that is not only super informative, but it also points to things in the device that's currently loaded in your project. So if I hold down a note, here's my filter. Okay, this is the filter from the device that's in my project. So I can learn about it, discover what different things do, and then play with those parameters and hear the changes. All right, this is a great learning resource. Please don't neglect to use the show help feature. I learn stuff from it all the time. All right, so with that said, I chose Polymer because it's a relatively simple instrument, but it's also a good gateway to some of the other more complex Bitwig concepts. For example, this is essentially a modular synthesizer, but before we get to that, at its most basic, it's a subtractive synth. We have an oscillator here that generates the sound, and we have 3 different simple waveform types that we can essentially kind of morph between and blend. All right, square, sawtooth, and a triangle. This is passing into a low-pass filter. All right. Underneath the low-pass filter, we have a filter envelope, so we can determine how the filter responds over time. We have an amplitude envelope over here, so we can determine how the volume of the notes, the amplitude changes over time. Under the oscillator, you have a sub-oscillator, which we can add. All right. And we can also change the ratio of the frequency being generated. All right. If you don't know much about synthesis or harmonics, don't freak out too much about this. But ultimately, these numbers here give you a ratio. All right. If I play the same frequency but double it, I'm going to get a tone that's an octave higher. And actually, this is probably not the best way to demonstrate. Let's turn down the sub-oscillator. There we go. All right, let me start with the note an octave lower. Here's my ratio, 1 to 1. All right, so if I double it, now it's double the fundamental frequency, double the frequency I was playing. So it's going to sound an octave higher. Let's say instead of making it double the frequency, I make it half the frequency. Let's change the denominator here. All right, so if I play the same note but half the frequency of it, it'll be an octave lower. If we continue to play with the ratios, we'll start to move up or down the harmonic series. All right, so that can be a lot of fun to play with. And if you want to do some more precise detuning or even stereo detuning, we can look over here. This allows me to change the frequency not based on a ratio, but actual semitones. And next to that, we have this plus minus button, which is a really cool feature where we can do some stereo detuning. I'm going to hit this. And now when I do that, this number over here determines how much I'm going to detune the left and right side from each other, which will give us a nice, warm, chorusy kind of feel. Okay, all right, not a bad start. Now let's get some notes in a clip and make some music happen.